So the price of gold doesn't matter. It doesn't move. I mean, it moves a little bit, but it's money because it's the most liquid commodity on the planet. That's what makes it money. What's moving is the dollar. So your question is, how low will the dollar go? And my answer is it will go to zero. Because the only way to stop it from going to zero is to stop the inflationary pyramid and to freeze gold at a certain dollar exchange rate, and that collapses whatever that price ends up being. That collapses the banking system because, again, once you print the money, the banks need a constant feed of that inflation in order to sustain the bigger and bigger repo trades that go on in the aorta. And if that stops, everything falls. So wherever they stop, if they decided to stop the hyperinflation, they would have to stop printing money, and then the entire global banking system would fall. The stable coins, I don't think they're going to be able to implement them in time to before the end game hits, because I think we only have a few months left. I'm looking at the price action of gold. What are we at now? Are we past 4150? It could be. I don't know. Every day gold can go up $300 now. It's like that happens. That's a thing now. The Stablecoin Act, whatever it's called, let's get the Genius Act. The Genius Act, all it is they just want to create another round of tickets on top of which will be backed by treasuries, which are backed by dollars, which are backed by gold, right? It's just another derivative layer. So for example, if we just let's get out of the stratosphere for a second where the CBDCs are and go back to what we can recognize, bank deposits, right? Bank deposits operate on a fractional reserve system where not all of the physical dollars are there. If you want to take out your cash, you can't do it all because only a certain fraction are there. Let's say 10%, it could be less. So you have everyone using bank deposits on a pile of cash reserves that don't actually exist, but the bank deposits stabilize the cash until there's a bank run, which there always is. So the stable coins would be like the equivalent of bank deposits to what bank deposits are now for dollars. Except you have the treasuries in the middle there. It's like several layers up, but it's the same concept, right? You'd have all these people with a bunch of stable coins, which would be backed by a smaller pile of treasuries, where everyone with a stable coin would think they have the claim to a certain amount of treasuries, but they don't, because that amount of treasuries doesn't exist. So until you have somebody, a whole bunch of people, a whole bunch of parties cashing in their treasuries so they can cash in for dollars, and then it doesn't work, and then what has to happen is that the Fed has to bail everything out again. But it's just a bank run at another level, and there's no immunity to economic law, no matter how far into space you are. It's all based on the same pyramid that's attached to the ground, based on gold and silver. And no matter how high you go, you can't separate the pyramid from the ground and completely detach it from physical corporeal reality, because otherwise prices have no meaning, and then the entire division of labor breaks down completely.
At the heart of the financial web lies the notion of backed instruments. Stablecoins, treasuries, bank deposits, all layered atop one another. A stablecoin issued today may claim backing by U.S. treasuries. Those treasuries claim backing by government by inflation-resilient trust. However, research into stablecoin run risk reveals these constructs may be inherently fragile. Redemptions might trigger cascades. The risk is that these layers sit on minimal real physical assets. While apparent claims look solid, the underlying reality may not support mass conversion to hard assets when the day of reckoning comes.
I've looked into this whole central banks are buying gold scheme. They're not. Central banks have a lot less gold than they did in the 1950s. There are certain isolated central banks that sometimes accumulate and then they sell it, and then they accumulate more and then they sell it. But on net, they're not accumulating anything. That's not happening. China is not preparing for a gold-backed yuan. That's not going to happen. It's impossible. Because in order to if gold is money and everything collapses because the derivatives no longer work or the credit no longer works, no country can say, well, everything collapsed. Well, now you can trust my ticket, my yuan ticket for a certain amount of gold, and believe me, it's there. And everyone says, oh, sure, great. We're going to trust China now, right? After America stole everything and printed everything and inflated everything up the wazoo, we're going to go to China. And okay, so that's first of all. It would have to be a credible gold standard, which means that people would have to be able to take their yuan to the Chinese central bank and say, "Here, give me my gold." And this would have to be openly exchangeable, very verifiable for months, years. America was only able to build a huge inflationary pyramid, gargantuan, massive global inflation pyramid, because it had such an honest, relatively honest monetary system for so long, for centuries. There were isolated bank runs, yeah, but those cleared out. There were minor depressions on those bank panics. Every time there was a bank panic, it cleared out a small layer of inflation that was corrupting the system, and it brought it back down to the base and brought back down money to a more honest base of what it was.
For centuries, gold served as the underpinning of monetary systems. In today's environment, with trust in currencies and credit stretched, gold's historic role is resurging. Analysts note that recent gold momentum is linked to a weakening U.S. dollar and rising inflation expectations. In contrast, the dollar's value may be the true moving piece, not gold itself. If the dollar's purchasing power erodes, the question becomes what replaces it? A return to physical money or another trust-based digital layer? Gold's rise hints that the public is leaning toward the former.
Right? And then you can rebuild from there. It's like building tiny pyramids, they fall, but people still trust your base. There's no way that after this dollar system falls, on which the yuan right now is based, after that falls, any country, any central bank is going to have to say, "Oh, well, we have the real gold-backed yuan," or whatever it is now. It's not happening. It's impossible. And even if they wanted to do it, let's say we had these saints in charge of China. It's a ridiculous thought, but let's just assume that they're good people, and they're like all Misesians now. They've learned Austrian school economics, and they want sound money, and they're now libertarian Chinese communists, whatever we want to call them. And they want an honest monetary system. So okay, fine. If they want that, they have to be willing to collapse their entire banking system and then risk assassination by the big bank honchos of their country, and they're going to get killed. So no, it's not happening. So the price of gold doesn't matter. It doesn't move. I mean, it moves a little bit, but it's money because it's the most liquid commodity on the planet. That's what makes it money. What's moving is the dollar. So your question is, how low will the dollar go? And my answer is it will go to zero. Because the only way to stop it from going to zero is to stop the inflationary pyramid and to freeze gold at a certain dollar exchange rate, and that collapses whatever that price ends up being. That collapses the banking system, because again, once you print the money, the banks need a constant feed of that inflation in order to sustain the bigger and bigger repo trades that go on in the aorta. And if that stops, everything falls. So wherever they stop, if they decided to stop the hyperinflation, they would have to stop printing money, and then the entire global banking system would fall.
It's widely touted that central banks are stocking up on gold in preparation for systemic collapse. But the data show a more nuanced picture. Some banks accumulate, others sell, and the global net is far from consistent accumulation. The idea that the People's Bank of China is covertly preparing for a gold-backed yuan is also challenged. Credible conversion schemes would require open, verifiable redeemability, something no major issuing nation currently offers. The implication: even if the treaty shift occurred, public confidence would likely lag, and execution risk would remain enormous.
If they want to do that, fine. And that they could rebuild from there. The dollar would still have purchasing power, but everyone who had savings in a bank, anyone who had a fractional reserve, what do you call it, stock portfolio, right? We don't know how many of those are fractional reserve, if the dollars are actually there, if the brokerages, they could just like hightail it to Epstein Island or wherever they want to go. Nobody knows. Right? It's also convoluted. So people with digital money in the stratosphere somewhere in cyberspace, they would probably lose almost all of it, if not all of it. There'd be a huge legal mess as to who owns whatever's left over. But that's not plausible, because they're not going to do that voluntarily. They're just going to keep printing and inflating until the dollar goes to zero, and they will let the people trigger the hyperinflation themselves. That's what happens every time. I can't think of a single historical example where a country voluntarily decided to stop inflation in the middle, like right before hyperinflation hit. And they're like, oh my God, it's going to be hyperinflation. We better stop. That's never happened before. It always leads to the collapse of societies, the collapse of empires, the collapse of countries, and now it's going to lead to the collapse of the entire global empire. And yeah, that's going to be scary, and some people are not going to survive. But those that do, hopefully, we will be able to build a better world. And I'm just trying to take it as calmly as I can because I know what's coming, and even though I don't know the details of how it's going to affect us, I know it's going to be the biggest event of any of our lives.
In the destruction of one monetary system and the birth of another, physical metal often becomes the intermediary. While gold is seen primarily as a store of value, silver is arguably the medium of exchange in a reset scenario: liquid, divisible, recognizable. After a monetary explosion, people may reject conventional bank credits entirely and revert to physical coins. This isn't far-fetched. Research shows industrial demand for silver is now substantial, yet monetary demand dwarfs it in a collapse. The key question becomes, at what silver-to-dollar exchange rate do people simply stop accepting dollars?
The most important when it comes to silver is that you should remember that monetary demand is from everybody all the time, whereas industrial demand is always very pinpointed. And though there's a lot of it, it's a lot less than monetary demand would be. Um, Back to the price of silver for a second. Are we going to get to 300, 400, 500? Again, that's not the question. The question is, at what exchange rate with the dollar will those who have silver just simply stop selling it and say, look, I don't want any dollars anymore. It doesn't. So what's the final price quote going to be on the final silver exchange between dollars and silver? I don't know. 600, 700. What does it matter? It doesn't matter what it's going to be, because in the end, silver is going to be the money. The dollar's going to be dead. So my bet, if I'm just gonna throw a number out there, I don't know, $700. It could be twice that. It could be three times that. But I'd say, okay, $700. People would stop. Say that's it. I don't want any more dollars. Just I'm going to keep my silver, and that'll be the end of exchange. And then the dollar loses everything, and everything goes to silver. What's the difference between silver and gold? Well, when the dollar collapses, gold becomes way too valuable for retail transactions. So the only way you can accomplish retail transactions with a liquid commodity is with a silver coin. Yes, you have to take it in your hand. You got to go to somebody with groceries and say, here's a coin, give me some groceries. That's what's going to happen for a while. That's not going to be the world we live in for like years after that. That's just once you have, like a nuclear explosion, a nuclear monetary explosion, then for a while you're going to, after ground zero, you're going to need to trade around the actual money. And then, there will be people that are willing to store your money, and they'll give you tickets so that you don't have to carry it, and we'll start this whole thing over again. But hopefully this time we'll be a little bit smarter about it and not be so centralized. We'll see what happens at the Tower of Babel. The industrial demand for silver is important, only in a relative sense, because like in the 1800s, early 1900s, there was very little industrial demand for silver. Now there's a lot. I don't know how much of that technology survives after the end game. Hopefully a lot of it. Hopefully it won't be like, all capital is destroyed. It's just going to be reorganized. Some of it will be destroyed, but I think we should basically have our technological backbone intact. Who knows? I could be wrong about that. But that just makes silver even more valuable than it would be if this had happened in the 18th or 19th centuries.
Our modern financial system is built on layers of abstraction: paper claims, bank deposits, treasuries, stablecoins, digital tokens. At the very top sits Bitcoin, an intangible token without inherent backing or physical claim. If the dollar link severs, Bitcoin and similar tokens risk being untethered from any real asset. Stablecoins too face run risk if reserve quality is low or transparency absent. In the endgame, if trust collapses and printing cannot continue, the system may unwind rapidly, taking banks, exchanges, and digital tokens with it, leaving only fundamentals, tangible things that people still recognize as money.
There's really nothing that interesting about an Excel file that you can share between people. Microsoft has Excel. It's a program on Office you can use. So you can share it through a Google Sheet, and then you have Bitcoin basically. Why is this so interesting? I never really understood it. Um, Bitcoin, I can't even tell you what it is because I don't understand what I don't, it's not a thing. It's just data that represents what? It represents nothing. There's nothing on it. It's just they pretend it's a credit for real goods and services, but why should it be a credit? Why should data be a credit for goods and services? You can only trade things for other things. It, Derivatives work because they represent the money, right? A dollar works because it represents a certain amount of gold. Yes, and it's more and more and more inflated, and but it still represents now $4,100 worth of $4,100 represents 1 ounce. So that's why you can trade dollars for things. Bitcoin doesn't represent anything. It represents people's fantasies about how many dollars it's going to be worth, right? But if you want a gold-backed blockchain, that might be doable. That might be okay. There's nothing wrong with blockchain. It's a convenient way to, I guess, trustlessly share title information with other people without a bank intermediary. Fine. Okay. Great. But Bitcoin as it is now doesn't represent anything. Um, it's a progression of a derivative chain where we keep getting higher and higher and higher into the stratosphere as this pyramid gets bigger and bigger, right? We start out with physical gold, which is the money, and then you start making tickets for that physical gold and storing it in the bank, and then you have physical cash, which is still physical, but it's more flimsy. And then you give those paper tickets to the bank and you say, you hold those paper tickets and I'll just digitally transfer, my credits to those physical paper tickets, which are representative of the gold that I gave you in the first place. And then meanwhile, that bank got robbed by FDR, and then, all that gold ended up at the Federal Reserve anyway, or Fort Knox, or if you think it's even still there, or who knows where it is now. And then after that, you have debt, treasuries, which is a promise to pay the bank deposits, which are representative of the physical cash that you gave the bank when you deposited your gold. And then after debt, you have after 3 or 4 layers above that, you have finally Bitcoin, which isn't even a claim to anything. It's totally disconnected. So it's going to fall in the end game once the dollar is no longer exchangeable for gold. Then the link between Bitcoin, the dollar, and gold gets severed because there's no direct link between Bitcoin and the dollar. So there's no direct link between Bitcoin and gold at all. So when the middle link, the dollar, gets severed, there's no connection, and then Bitcoin becomes a worthless token of nothing.